It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And we have officially crossed over. When we left last week, we closed the doors on Camp Dynasty, shut it up for the night. It was not officially draft season, Collin. And today, you wake up, you open it up, and the sun shines a little brighter because it's Senior Bowl week, which means the draft season has officially begun.
Yeah, the beauty of the program is that it's always draft season at Camp Dynasty. But once everybody else kind of gets involved and you hear the buzz and you get the Senior Bowl, you get, all the guys kind of showing off. You'll get pro days, we'll get combine, we'll get everything down the road here. And it all starts with the Senior Bowl. This is what it's all about, man.
I mean, we're no longer just the psychos like sitting in the corner, like spewing 2024 draft names in like September, like now everybody cares.
Yeah.
So it's a very exciting time. Camp Dynasty is born because of a love of Dynasty, but also a love of the NFL draft. So this is one of, it is the best time of the year as far as I'm concerned. This stretch run that, takes us through all those things you just listed off up until the NFL draft, when these players that are going to be factoring in for our Dynasty teams in, less than a year now, they all wind up in the NFL. So we are going to celebrate the beginning of this 2024 draft season by going through the Senior Bowl rosters. It is Senior Bowl week. Like I said, measurements were coming in today, some of which were very illuminating in both directions on the spectrum, but we'll get into some of that today. But how we're going to do this to make it a little bit interesting for everybody and for ourselves is, instead of just running through each position group and saying, I kind of like this player, we're going to turn this into a draft because it's draft season. So why not kick it off with a draft of the Senior Bowl rosters? We will each be drafting 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 2 IDPs.
Yeah, we're going to, bring in a little bit of competition in here. You took my guy. Yeah. You gotta stand on something and, get on the soapbox to defend your picks. Maybe it makes it a little more interesting than just running through and being like, you know what, I kind of like Johnny Wilson, big guy.
Yeah. I just kind of like him, but let's move on. No, we're going to turn this into a draft. And I got to say, well, first and foremost, the wide receivers. We're not going to have any problem picking 3 of those. There's going to be more than we can hang on to in this group. It's one of the best groups of any skill position at the Senior Bowl that I can remember. I can't remember one that was better. So, I mean, it's loaded in that department. Now, the other position groups, to varying levels, not quite up to that standard that these wide receivers have set. And even more so after some news that has been trickling in as we got closer and closer to the start time for this podcast, which is that a lot of names that I had my eye on for our upcoming draft here have decided to not participate in this year's Senior Bowl. We know that this happens every year. Guys get advised, like maybe, sit this one out. Circumstances happen. In some cases, injuries. There's less names than I was hoping for, and a few categories are a little bit weaker than I was hoping for, but we're still going to make it work. And there's still plenty of names here that are relevant and interesting, intriguing at this point in time.
Kids these days, man. They're scared to compete in the Senior Bowl.
I saw somebody say, now we're treating the Senior Bowl like it's just any other bowl, I guess. Yeah. Everybody pulls out.
No, yeah, guys are getting ready for the draft. I mean, agents and, the people that are going to end up making them money are advising them what they should do. And, they'll be missed, but we got a decent group of guys regardless.
Yeah, well, have plenty to talk about. Varying levels of this class. We'll have some early guys, we'll have some mid-round guys, and we'll have some deep sleepers already to talk about today. So with all of that said, let's kick things off. And I'm going to do this in real time.
Nice.
No funny business.
Well, you're doing it on a computer, so it is funny
yeah.
business. I can see you typing right now. I know it's.
Don't worry about it. Don't look at my hands. I'm trying to get a coin over here. What am I typing?
Typing in heads, coin, Google Images, and then share your screen.
See, this is the thing about this. It's always tails on the computer. That's why I hate this thing. So
I won.
You did win, and I don't know why you hate the computer so much when you literally always win.
Well, I won like 6 in a row with the real coin. That's why.
All right. Well, you have the first pick. There are no rules here. You can pick any position that you'd like. There's, maybe a strategy in play here. I don't know. So you tell me who is the first pick in this Senior Bowl watch list draft.
Okay. I don't know if there's a good strategy to go here, and I don't think dipping into the deepest position group first is the best strategy. But I'm going to take Ladd McConkey first overall because he's just like the Senior Bowl guy this year. That's how I feel. I mean, we've kind of mentioned him in passing over the season here at Camp Dynasty, but I think he's, a little underrated because, Georgia doesn't pass a lot. He looks a little funny out there. He's lanky, whatever. But, I mean, he's a solid route runner, and he's really good after the catch. And I think that he's got the type of skill set that will be getting shared on Twitter from the one-on-ones because – those are just set up for the corners to fail. You got to defend like a third of the field against guys that can run whatever routes that they want. And McConkey's a good route runner. So he's just, I feel like, going to get a little bit of a boost from this Senior Bowl process.
Yeah, that's always a big part of it. Any receiver that's twitchy, that can run good routes, get off the line quickly, they're set up for success in this environment. We see this every year. We saw it last year with players that literally, elevated their draft stock. It's not like, oh, they showed up to the Senior Bowl and suddenly he's a second round pick, like Tank Dell, Jaden Reed, like these were good players that really solidified their tape in Mobile and caused them to get drafted. In some cases, despite, smaller frames, sizes, things like that, when you got chops like a guy like Tank Dell and it shows up in Alabama in February, it's a good position to be in. And McConkey is a player that I've had a chance to dive in a little bit deeper into this wide receiver group since we went through the top end in wide receiver rankings. McConkey is incredible. He's a real prospect, man. Like this is what I'm saying with this year's Senior Bowl group is like a lot of times it's going to be these, later guys that are kind of just trying to bring it home. Like I see McConkey as a second round wide receiver. Like,
I agree
firmly. And if he comes in and lights it up here this week and does some of those things, like you said, puts out those clips and stuff, there's going to be a lot more people talking about him in that way where suddenly it's going to be like, yeah, we got a lot of big guys. We got a lot of these, Brian Thomas Jr., Keon Coleman types in this class. Ladd McConkey comes in at 5'11", 187, and he is just a killer. Some of the routes on his film are just ridiculous. I tweeted that video of the out and up in which the corner just, it was like classic ankle breaker moment because he just sells those breaks so hard. The way that he sinks his hips, that he shoots, and then he'll make a double move. He's got a lot of skill. And like you said, really good after the catch as well. So you have a player that's getting open a lot and that can do something with the ball in his hands. it's a good recipe, and he's going to be a player that I think I'm pretty high on, all the way through this cycle.
Yeah, I think he's one of those late round players like that is just good at a lot of things, and that's all that you can ask for. That's all that you're looking for. I mean, there's examples of that, like you mentioned from last year, where it's just he can do everything, and he blocks on this. Everybody has to block on this Georgia offense too. So, I mean, if you're looking for somebody that might be a little discounted, that might be, a little bit suppressed. I mean, if he gets second round NFL draft capital, then we're singing a different tune, because then he starts to jump up in ADP probably. But as of now, he looks like he's going to be a riser because of the Senior Bowl, would be my expectation.
Yeah, that's going to be something that I think we're going to talk about a lot over the next month or so. Is, I mean, a guy like McConkey in this sort of a class. I mean, I'm pulling it up here in terms of like, where does he sit? Because I'm sitting here like, man, this is a hell of a player. Like, this is a player that I think has like a real fantasy ceiling in the right situation in the NFL. And he's currently sitting at my wide receiver 9 in this class.
Yeah.
So it's like, and there's names below that I'm like, oh, damn. So, yep. I mean, it's one of those things where I know we can't get too far ahead of ourselves at this point, but these second round dynasty pick wide receivers are legitimate guys.
Like, maybe even third rounders.
Yeah.
Like, it's just such a deep class. Like, guys, the running backs will have to go somewhere. And then you have 3 fantasy relevant quarterbacks potentially. Like, we're going to be looking at value through 3 rounds of a dynasty draft. And then, I mean, if you're playing IDP,
dude, I know. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So it's as deep as we thought it was. I keep watching tape. I keep liking what I'm seeing from wide receivers. So it just doesn't stop going. And there's a few more names that we can talk about. How about right now? Because I'm up next. Are we going to do a snake? Are we snaking this thing?
With 2 people, it's a little weird, because then it's just 2 picks in a row, 2 picks in a row, 2 picks in a row.
You're right. You're right. I'll just lose the draft. I don't care. All right. My first pick in this draft, the second pick in this draft, I'm going to take Xavier Legette. We're just going to keep the wide receiver run coming here. There's another player that okay, whatever. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Torn between this player and another player that I'm sure we'll talk about shortly. But the reason I go with Legette here, I teased this a little bit last week when we did rankings. He's just more, I'm not going to call him like a polished route runner, but there was more on his film than I was expecting for a player with his background and the sort of body type and athleticism mold that he is. Because you see the clips, like the first time we talked about him this season, and it was that one play where it was like, how is this large man moving this fast? And then you kind of think like, okay, this is what he is. He's a 5th-year guy who's just really fast, really big, making these sorts of plays. And then when you watch him, it's a little bit more, suddenness and sharpness out of his routes than I was expecting. I mean, he's not really like one of the, full body route runners. He's not bringing a ton of nuance to his routes, but he has that lower body explosiveness to make sharp cuts on slants and digs and things like that. So he's got a little bit more well-roundedness than I gave him credit for. And I mean, obviously at this size, that's pretty impressive. Now, he did come in and measure in at 6'1", and he was listed at 6'3". And that is a common theme with some of the guys that we'll talk about here, where they're getting embellished by like 2 inches or more. I mean, it's not changing what I see the player as, he's 6'1", he's not good anymore, but it does change a little bit because he's not quite that like ultra freak, like 6'4", 225, can go up and snatch it and also run like a 4.39, you know, like he's a little bit more of that, you know, classic build of a wide receiver, a little bit on the heavier side, still weighing in here at what was it? I'm
223.
223. So he's still got a little bit of bulk. He's jacked.
He's a well-built young man.
He's a well-built young man. And so I think he's a player that can show us something this week. There's already buzz behind this name. A lot of folks like the, you know, the freakiness of Legette. And I think he gets to show that off this week and makes even more fans in this process.
Yeah, I think there's some people that expect Legette to be a first rounder just because of the traits that he has. I mean, talk about someone that's just oozing athleticism and so good with the ball in his hands. I mean, he had 451 yards after catch, which feels like less than I was expecting because he had 1,250 yards. Like I just felt like some more of that. But then you go back and you look at how he's actually getting these yards, and it goes back to what you were saying. It's like, oh, there's actually some like real wide receiver play here. It's not just like gimmicky, get the ball in his hands and watch him go. It seemed like early in the season, it was more of that, like, you know, run a drag and see what happens. And every once in a while, it turns into that Mississippi State play where he just like gets the ball and everybody takes a wrong angle because they're just like, good Lord, this guy can move. And so I think he absolutely has a chance to help himself in this Senior Bowl process. I think the measurements obviously didn't help him, like you said, because he's listed at 6'3", about 225, and he measures in at 6'1", 223, whatever. So, I mean, I think it's fine. Like, it's not like he's short.
Right. And
so
that's the, like, it's the danger. It's not a dangerous game, but it's like when you see the numbers of 6'3", 227, and then you see how fast he is, you're like, my God, this is like a one of one, like freaky sort of a guy. And I mean, 6'1's not changing a lot, but it's like, it's a little bit less. And to be honest, I think it kind of explains one area of his game that I wasn't super in love with, which was his catch point ability. I mean, you expect a player that's 6'3" to be going up consistently and pulling it down, and that's not what you see on his film. Well, it does make it a little bit more easy to explain when, okay, he's 6'1". He's not really that sort of a guy who's going to be going up over the top of corners, you know, on a regular basis. He's more in line with that sort of prototypical wide receiver height. So again, it's not like stock down because he's 2 inches shorter, but it does paint a little bit of a clearer picture of who this player is and what we can expect him to be.
Yeah. And there are flashes where he does go up and pluck the ball.
Oh yeah.
And like, that is encouraging to see him do it. And like, okay, it's there, and like, you know how to get your hands over your head and keep them soft, and get up and make those catches. That's nice to see, and it would be nice to see it more consistently. But yeah, I agree. Legette is an interesting player. I feel like he's going to be very divisive.
You're up next. Are we going to keep the wide receiver run coming?
I'm gonna get a thin position. I'm gonna get my guy out of here, and it's Ben Sinnott.
I knew you were gonna do it to me.
I know. I figured that's what you were talking about, so I needed to get him off the board because it's just a good player, man. Like, he came in bigger than I think we were both expecting because he looked smaller.
It's the biggest story of the day for me, personally. To see the player come in at over 250 pounds, I'm like, that's it, to the moon.
Yep. So 6'4", 254. He measured in at. He was listed 6'4", 245, and it was like he almost looked smaller than that. But to know that he's carrying like 250 pounds and still moving how he moves is really nice. Like that is something that's like, all right, this might be like a real tight end prospect. Because if you listen to the tight end episode, it was kind of like, well, we don't know exactly what Sinnott is. Because like maybe he's a fullback hybrid kind of thing. I brought up Kyle Juszczyk's name, and like that would be great. But you see him, 250 and making, moving like he does, catching the ball like he does, and it starts to feel a lot more like, hey, maybe this is just easily the tight end 2 of the class. And I think the Senior Bowl is gonna, get people on that train with us.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing for me, obviously, was what you just said. This was my number 2 tight end in the class when we talked about rankings, and it was like, but if he comes in and he's like 239 and 6'3", then it's like, what do we do with this? And this was like everything I wanted to see. Was he hit 6'4", like exactly, like just nailed it, but he hit it. And 254. I mean, that's it. He has a tight end build. He moves in a way that a player of this size, just, it's not common for a player like this to run routes in this way, to be able to snap off his breaks in the ways that he can at this size. And honestly, I feel like number 34 just wasn't doing him any justice.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it just made him look smaller. So he's not the biggest.
Look like a running back.
Yeah, no, it did. It really did. And he's not the biggest tight end in the world. Like that's fine. And I swear to God, everybody, I'm not going to keep doing this because this is not a comp, but it just, the Sam Laporta stuff where it was like Laporta was smaller, and then Laporta comes in and it was like, okay, he's 6'4", 246 or whatever he came in at. And it was like, okay, that's fine. Like, he's not the biggest guy. Well, and then you find out these guys don't need to be 260 pounds, like if an offensive coordinator or, whatever system this player is in can utilize his talents, then we're golden. But on top of all of that, he does already have this, 250 plus box checked. So, again, not a perfect player. This isn't like, he's creeping up on Brock Bowers. Like, it's just, it's a good tight end that really kind of locked it in for me. Like, I think this is the second best tight end in this class. He's the next guy after Bowers. I have him sort of like NFL wise, like late second right now, early third, and that might even be high, but that's how much faith I have in a player that shows you at this position when they can run routes already. That's a big leg up. And that's what I saw with Sinnott.
Yes. Ben
I got the
Sinnott.
name. I got the name right. I'm not going to screw it up anymore. He's my tight end too. Can't screw it up.
That's right. Yeah. So very pleasantly surprising player. Hopefully in the NFL picks a different number. That's not 34, right?
I think 34.
Yeah, 34. He's wearing 81 at the Senior Bowl. So here we go.
Dude. 1 week wearing 81, everybody's going to be like, oh my God.
They're going to be like, who's this guy?
This guy is insane. What the heck?
Yeah, who's this running back from Kansas State?
Yeah. All right. Well, you sniped me on that one. Now I got to adjust on the fly, but I guess I will take another wide receiver.
Okay.
I'm going to take Malachi Corley. Because, I picked Legette with my first pick. I have Legette slightly higher than Corley right now. I've been seeing people throw out the words, and I get it. This is going to be a thing every single draft cycle now, and most of the time it's complete BS. I've been seeing people throw out the words Deebo Samuel when they talk about Xavier Legette.
Yeah.
Okay, great. They both went to South Carolina. Like, I don't see that comparison necessarily, but more power to you if you do. If you wanted to comp Malachi Corley to Deebo Samuel, I would not throw that back in your face. I think this player has that sort of running back in a wide receiver body skill set that is going to make him very attractive to NFL teams come draft time. And I think it starts right now, where we get to find out, what does Corley look like in the one-on-ones? What does he look like in, the scrimmages and against these other players? Because playing at Western Kentucky this year, this was a player that we talked about all the way back to the summer. The Yak King, I believe is his nickname, comes in off of this unbelievable yards after the catch season, over 900 yards after the catch in 2022. He didn't quite get there this year, but he did have another 683 after the catch. Now, you play at Western Kentucky, you're not really playing a lot of teams. They did play Ohio State early in the year. Corley did have 88 yards and a touchdown in that game. But other than that, it's a name that gets pushed to the side until this time, when people start seeing him do what he does in this environment. And then it's like, all right, what do we got here with Corley? If he can have a great week like that, if he can start turning heads and start to show, I got a lot of skill to offer. I'm versatile. I'm a wide receiver first and foremost, but you can line me up in the backfield. You can get creative with me. You can put the ball in my hands and I will make it a good thing for you. If he can do that consistently this week, I think he sets himself up to be a high pick, like high early day 2 sort of a guy, like mid round 2. That's about where I have him right now, based on the last 2 years of work that he's put out. So a good process from here to the draft, it's going to do him wonders.
Yeah, I think Corley, his strengths show up more in real football, than it will in Lad McConkey will thrive in those one-on-ones. He's good at the other stuff too, but I think the route running will be on display with those one-on-ones. I think Corley, like you mentioned, is a physical runner with the ball in his hands. And that comes into play when he's catching balls over the middle. He catches them through contact, taking it and staying on his feet sometimes and finishing the plays. So, I mean, I love Malachi Corley. I think that he's really, really nice slot receiving kind of guy that every NFL team could use. This is just a guy that you can give the ball, 6 times a game and he can make something happen. So I don't hate Deebo. I don't hate the Deebo count. I mean, he's 5'10", 215, I think is what he ended up coming in at.
Yep.
And he's a little, smaller but when I say he runs aggressive, he's trying to run through somebody's face as a guy that's this small, and he's got moves that he can put on people in the open field. I think he's going to turn some heads, especially if he can run some real routes, because Western Kentucky, it's a lot of screens. It's a lot of, over routes, a lot of crossing routes. There's not a lot to evaluate of Corley running the big boy routes, because they didn't ask him to. And, it was fine that they didn't ask him to, because he was so good at what they were doing with him. So it'll be interesting to see him, in those one-on-ones, to see if he's, getting a certain amount of separation, and then on top of that, in a real offensive scheme rather than, a more gadgety kind of role.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a big opportunity for him to put a little bit more of, his ability as a route runner in front of everybody. Because like you said, I mean, you throw on some Western Kentucky Malachi Corley tape and you're just going to see a ton of screens because it works. He's so good at turning those plays into huge gains. So they did it a lot. You see him stretch the field a little bit once in a while. That shows up, but let's see it in action. Let's see it consistently on this level of competition. And that could boost his stock even more. So,
yep.
All right, you're up again.
I am up again. I think I'm going to dive into another shallow pool. I'm actually between three names here because there's three positions that I feel like I can go into. And I'm going to go into IDP. And I'm going to get my guy, Laiatu Latu. So he's at the Senior Bowl. We chatted about him for a while on the IDP episode. He's my IDP 1. And I'm just excited that this is a player that exists. Because, I mean, he is a polished edge rusher coming in. He's got the medical background with the neck injury. He was like partially paralyzed, and then he had to take some time off from football, ended up coming back. And I mean, he just is super, super impressive. Ended up coming in at 6'4.5", 261. And I just want to see him, dominate some guys in this setting. They do the pass rush drills where you get to go one-on-one, and then he can also just be a game wrecker in the scrimmages. So I just like watching this guy, and I'm excited that he's a part of this draft process.
Yeah, and more so a part of this event, because it's not often that you get a player of this caliber coming to the Senior Bowl to show what he's got. And I think a lot of that has to do with the background, with having this sort of like chip on his shoulder to prove himself, to say, you know what, I'm healthy, I'm ready to compete, and I want to play my way into being the edge one in this class. And I think, Latu is a player that is just, the tape is just phenomenal. And so he should absolutely light this environment up. If you're talking about defensive drills and on the defensive side, the wide receivers tend to steal the show. Once in a while, you'll get the running backs. We got some good quarterbacks there this year. That's going to be something to watch. When defensive players of this caliber go to the Senior Bowl, they destroy. And that's what I would expect Latu to do this week. And it's going to be a lot of, okay, yeah, this is the guy. Like, this is who we thought he was on film. He's doing that in this environment. He deserves to be that top half of round one sort of a pick. So that's what's at stake for Latu this week, is to put that exclamation point on this entire process and say, I am that guy and I'm ready to compete for my spot on top of my position group.
Yeah, I'm curious if he even has a chance to be the edge one in this class, because not only the medicals, but also he's just older than Dallas Turner and Jared Verse. So he's got some stuff working against him, but I still feel like he'll end up somewhere, top half of the first round, mid first, and be a home run for whoever ends up taking him.
He's actually 1 month younger than Jared Verse.
Is he really?
Yep.
Wow.
Medically retired for 2 years, and
I'd be embarrassed if I was Jared Verse.
He's still not.
I just assumed he was old. That's crazy.
Yeah. So they're both 20. They'll both be 23 on draft day. So two older
Why
players.
Did Jared Verse not come out last year?
That's what I'm saying, man.
Ugh.
I don't know, but that's the thing with Turner. I think Turner ends up edge one because he's 2 years younger and a little projecty. Is that a word?
No,
Tradesy.
but we can work.
We could work with that. But like we talked about on IDP rankings, like Jared Verse, Laiatu Latu, they got 2 years on Turner, and it shows up with their polish and their ability as pass rushers. So very excited to watch Latu this week. And same can be said with this IDP that I will be taking with my next pick, and it's Payton Wilson, because Payton Wilson is another player. I mean, these two could just be linked at the hip in terms of what there is to prove during this next 2.5 months or whatever it is. Latu, he's locked up. Like, at least in my opinion, I feel like he's a first round lock. Now, medicals, I don't know. Maybe there's more than we think there is, but the tape says first round lock. Payton Wilson, obviously not quite to that caliber, but a player that has medical question marks in his background that will make it intriguing to watch what happens to him through this process and where it seems like he is destined to be drafted. But in the same fashion that I said with Latu, this is a player that should look very good in this environment. He's very athletic, very fast. There's going to be a lot of Payton Wilson flying around in the drills, similarly to a player like Ivan Pace last year. And, Payton Wilson's not going to be a UDFA. So unless the medical question marks are really bad, he's not going to be a UDFA. And we saw Ivan Pace dominate in this environment last year. I expect to see Payton Wilson do the same. And that alone could be enough for this linebacker group, which is sort of fluid and kind of open for the taking. Wilson has a chance to play his way up that list, I think, as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is a situation where he can put on a show. I mean, the speed, the athleticism is all really good. He's like going to be flying around in all of these drills, in the scrimmages, going to be making plays. And the real question is, like you said, like, where is he going to get drafted and how much can he actually help his draft stock? Because you look at the season that he put together this year, and it kind of speaks for itself. Like, there's not really a hole in his resume, and it all shows up on tape too. So I don't know if he has a ton to prove here at the Senior Bowl, but he can come out here and dominate this, like, all these events, and it's not going to hurt. I can tell you that. So, I mean, if he's a, second round linebacker in the NFL, which feels right to me, then we're looking pretty good, because this is a guy that is going to get a ton of tackles. He's going to make plays on top of that, and that's all you can really ask for.
All right. 2 IDPs come off the board with back-to-back picks. Which direction do you choose to go now?
I got to take Michael Penix.
I knew you were going to take him, you mother.
I'm getting scared that I'm going to get left with one of these other guys. So going with Michael Penix. Obviously, this quarterback class is headed by, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and then it's kind of question mark after that. And a lot of the question marks are in this Senior Bowl. You got guys like Penix, you got Bo Nix, you got, that I'll leave it there. We'll say those are the guys that we're looking at in the NFL draft circles. But I just think Penix is easily better than everybody else that's going to be at the Senior Bowl. And I'm shocked that he's even going to be at the Senior Bowl. But after the elongated season with the college football playoff, going in and, having a Heisman worthy season, again, another guy that really doesn't have very much to prove, but I mean, I'm excited to see him throwing to these wide receivers is the real part of it, because you look at that he's playing with some guys that we'll probably talk about a little later, but Malachi Corley is one of them. Like, he's going to have a chance to catch the balls from a real NFL caliber quarterback, and hopefully Penix can make him look good and vice versa.
Yeah, I wonder if Penix being at the Senior Bowl and competing here tells you that there is something to prove for this player. Like, I feel like what you led the conversation with, which is that it's sort of become a 3-horse race at the top. And, there's levels to that. Like, we know that Caleb and Drake are, the tier 1 sort of players. And then Daniel sort of slots in after that. And then it kind of opens up. And in my opinion, Penix is that next guy pretty easily. And he should be talked about, not, Jane Daniels is going to go top 5 or whatever in the NFL because that's just the nature of it. And a guy like Penix is not really the mold of player that's going to go in that spot in the draft. But I think on a talent basis, those players are very close. They are very close. And so Penix being at the Senior Bowl and going through this process, I think says, I'm trying to play my way into this conversation. I feel like my name's getting left out right now. I hear a lot of talk about Jane Daniels while people are saying, will Penix be a first-round pick? That's in question right now. Like, that is not a guarantee based on the mock drafts that have been coming out from the more connected sources in the industry. Like, Daniel Jeremiah doesn't have Penix in the first round. So what does that mean? Well, here's Penix's opportunity to do exactly what you and I both think he's going to do in this sort of environment, which is look like the best quarterback here and put on a little bit of a show and say, remember me, I'm the guy who put this on film for 2 years. So let's not, miss the forest through the trees here. Like, this is a good player just because he's not this like hyper mobile, sort of quarterback. He has a lot of value with his arm strength and his accuracy and his ability to throw to all levels of the field, which is what we saw him do at Washington at an extremely high level, especially this year.
Does it miss the forest for the trees?
What did I even say? I like panicked.
Through the trees. Miss the forest through the tree. I think it's because you're like seeing the trees instead of the forest, the big picture.
It's like that thing when you use these like
sayings. You say it so much it just becomes right.
I know. Like, how many times have I said that throughout my life, and everyone's like, "Well, isn't it 4? Like, what are you talking about?"
I'm here for you.
I thank you. I need that in my life. So that's why I come here, actually.
So, yeah, Penix.
All right.
It's going to be fun to watch him throwing the ball to these guys.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll talk about I'll save my quarterback pick for later, but we'll talk about another player. For now, I think I have to stop this disrespect of the running back position. And I'm going to take, in my eyes, the best running back at the Senior Bowl this year, and that is MarShawn Lloyd. Now, Lloyd is a player that through the season, if you were following along with us, it's a player that got a couple badges. I started to get kind of excited about him based on what I was seeing from USC and how they were using him and his ability. And I still think he's a good runner. I think he's among this roster is pretty easily the best running back here, in my opinion. There are questions about ball security with Lloyd. He's also an older player. He will be 23 when he's drafted, which you throw the running back multiplier on there, and it's like he's 46 years old already. But as a runner and what he put on film this year, I think this is a good player that has power and speed He has an ability to, be a one-cut runner and be explosive in the open field as well. Pass catching got him involved a little bit in that area, not a ton, but he made the most out of it. 13 catches, but went for 232 yards. So shows an ability to kind of do a little bit of everything. Don't think he does anything at an extremely high level, but he's a player that I think has an NFL spot, and that's really all we can ask for when we're talking about later running backs in this draft class.
Yeah, that's the truth. Is like we're looking at guys that are going to be going in like the third, fourth round, and they'll probably be rotational pieces in an NFL backfield, and you're going to just be like maybe stashing them, handcuffing them, stuff like that. Lloyd is a guy that, like, if he takes over in a backfield, could hold on to a role in a backfield. That's basically like something that none of the other running backs, maybe one of the other running backs, can say in this Senior Bowl roster. And so I agree. It's like he can do a fair amount of things. We've been keeping an eye on him. He's not special, but he can do a lot of things well. So see if he can look better than that potentially in the Senior Bowl and like change some opinions about this, this running back class as a whole, this group, because right now it's a little bit bleak.
Yeah, and I do want to give a quick shout out to a player that pulled out, or it's something happened where he disappeared from the roster today, and that is Jalen Wright. And the reason I want to shout out Jalen Wright is because when I was watching these running backs in anticipation for this episode, I was like, okay, like whatever, let's just see what we got here. Like day three. Ooh, what is this? Jalen Wright, a player that I think we may have more conversations about in the coming weeks as we talk more and more about what this running back class can offer. So I just want to throw that out there. Jalen Wright, you have been acknowledged at Camp Dynasty. You're
right.
up next.
I am up next, and I'm just gonna I think I'm gonna stick with running back because I don't have a running back yet. So I'm gonna take Cody Schrader because I feel like he's the only real running back left. So Cody Schrader is also an old man. I don't know his exact age. I'm gonna check it.
It's not available.
Okay, right. Thanks, college football.
Yeah, he's one of the only ones I can't put a number behind, but he's a graduate student, and this is like his 6th year playing football.
Yeah, great.
So,
okay, good. Thank you for that, Cody. But he's a fine player. He is also a guy that like is worth drafting late, like very late in your rookie draft, and seeing what happens, because that's about all we can do. He was very productive at Missouri. He has a he's like Blake Corum if Blake Corum was like worse at football, and you know how much we love Blake Corum, so that's a ringing endorsement. So there's not a whole lot going on at running back in this Senior Bowl is kind of the point that I'm getting at. And Schrader also came in a little smaller than he is listed. He came in at 5'8", 207. So yeah, here we are.
Yeah. A lot of the running backs came in even smaller, and this is a small group that's going to be in Mobile. But yeah, Schrader, fun story, man. We had fun talking about him a couple times during the season, and he had a great year for Missouri. But I watched him leading up to this, and I don't see it. I think he's late day 3 sort of a player, and it's a player that I don't want to count him out because he's made a career on living off of doubt. I mean, starting at the FCS level, grinding all the way to the, SEC Division I college football on a good team and being one of the leading rushers in the conference. So he's done everything right in his football journey. But when I look for NFL running back traits, I see a player that's small, slow, and not extremely, physical. He's got a little bit of cutback, but just a player that I think is not quite there. And that's just me being brutally honest, because I don't want anybody to think that I'm sitting here like, oh, what are some of these running backs though? Like, we know this is a weak running back crew. We do a top 5 and we're sort of like groaning when we're talking about number 5. How do you think it's going to be when we're talking about number 10? And that's kind of what I think about Cody Schrader. Now, this is his chance. This is everybody's chance. It's the Senior Bowl. Go have your moment. Go prove people wrong. We'll talk about that with a couple more running backs as well.
He's only 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Blake Corum.
Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Anyway, let's save us, please. Bring us somewhere else.
All right. Let's go back to wide receiver. I got one more left to pick.
Corner in the market.
Yeah, I was going to save it because there's some names that I really like yet. And I'm not even going to pick the highest wide receiver on my list right now. Like, I'm not going to pick my next guy. I'm going to pick a guy that I think can raise his stock in this environment. And you already know who that is. It's Jacob Cowing. I've been talking about this for months. So of course I'm going to draft him to my Senior Bowl watch list team. Cowing is a player that I think really embodies opportunity in this environment. And the measurements that came out today were not kind to him. He's listed here. I'm looking at 5'11", 175. That's what he was listed at. He comes in 5'8", 165. Do those numbers ring a bell?
Yes.
Because they should. That was exactly what Tank Dell measured in last year. So this is a player that's even smaller than I thought he was. He is up against the Tank Dells of the world when you're talking about like first percentile wide receiver measurables. But look at what Tank Dell's doing, man. Who cares? Like, who cares? And Cowing doesn't have the, elite level route running that Tank Dell had. I mean, Tank Dell was a special route runner, but Cowing is not half bad himself. And this is going to be one of those players that is living in those one-on-one drills, and people are going to be tweeting the videos and saying, oh my God, Cowing, look at this one. So I don't know what to expect really anymore with Cowing in terms of NFL draft, projections and capital and all of that, especially in this deep wide receiver class. But that might just make it even more intriguing that a player like this will maybe be a day 3 pick and might have value in despite that. So let's see something promising from Cowing. It's one of my guys. He's been one of my guys, and I'm rooting for him.
Yeah, he's definitely been all aboard. He's been a camper for a while, 2 years now, getting sent out into the world. And I'm rooting for him, man. I mean, he always looked a little smaller than 5'11", and it was always like a little bit like, well, 5'11" seems a little rich. But yeah, 5'8" I didn't expect. That was a little bit shocking. But he's coming off his, since he kind of announced himself at UTEP in his 3rd year with 1,300 yards. He had 1,000 last year, only 860 yards this year. And so he has a little bit of ground to make back up, I'd say, because he was one of the premier. It was kind of odd because he could have came out last year, but last year there were so many guys like him. Like, it was a lot of slot receivers, a lot of small receivers, a lot of, so you come out this year and now you're in a loaded wide receiver class, so you just get buried in it. So he has a chance in the Senior Bowl to highlight himself and like show off a little bit and bring his talent to light to people that may not have noticed him over the last couple of years. So, I mean, we're big Cowing fans, and we'll see how it develops and see if he can turn some heads. But, I mean, I don't see why not.
Listen, that what you just said, that's a real thing. There's a lot of big players in this class. Teams want to fill out your versatility, your positions at the wide receiver position. This is going to be one of your better slot players, I think, in this group. So it's a player that shows you for 3 years now that he can compete in the college football level, run some really good routes, run after the catch. We'll find out what this looks like for Jacob Cowing. All right. That is my last wide receiver. So the rest are yours for the taking, but will you go that direction right now?
Well, I'll hold off on wide receiver since now, we both have a running back to select. We both have IDP to select. So which way do I go? I mean, is there a running back? Do we want to go back to that conversation? I don't know.
Remember what I said? I got all hot and bothered last week. Let's try to be positive. Let's see the best in the running backs that are remaining.
Okay. Emani Bailey out of TCU, I'm taking. So he's an electric player. He is really fast. Like that is the thing that you see on tape. Is like when he gets going, he can go. He's also very jittery. He can make guys miss in the open field. He kind of slides through holes. And that's because he measured in at 5'7", 208 pounds. I mean, this is a small running back. Like the 5'7" is crazy. And we saw last year, I'm going to go to Deuce Vaughn, because he was a small running back and he was ultra productive. He was pretty much a complete running back prospect, and he cannot see the field in the NFL. So the thing is with Vaughn, he was kind of like a power back that can do everything. He was like a workhorse in like Rondale Moore's body, versus Emani Bailey is just kind of like a scat back, which is what you need to be if you're going to be 5'7". So I don't know about an NFL role, but I know that the guy can probably play special teams, and I know that you can stick on rosters if you can play special teams, and then maybe you get a receiving back role or something like that, and then you're valuable in a PPR league. So that's what I got for positivity for Emani.
Yeah, I mean, I liked, there were some moments, Emani Bailey this year. I mean, he had a great year. I mean, 1,200 yards for TCU, and that was not a good team this year. He was always one of the bright spots for them on a weekly basis, and that fan base liked him a lot too. There were a couple times where I was like, what's going on with Emani Bailey? And you kind of do a little bit of like reconnaissance in TCU Twitter, and it's just a bunch of people being like, our team sucks, but at least we have Emani Bailey. Like, that's kind of what the vibes were with this year. But so he was kind of a player that I thought was interesting. Like you said, very jittery, very dynamic sort of a runner in the open field, and a lot of missed tackles forced this year, 70 missed tackles forced. The 5'7" was a gut punch, man.
Seriously.
I had like a later day 3, like borderline, like 6th, 7th round sort of a grade on him at 5'9", and I was like, oh my God. So it's a lot of really small players though. Like a lot of these running backs, like all of these guys, like Schrader, Bailey, I mean, a lot of players that were listed like 5'9" or 5'10" and coming in, 2 inches smaller than that. So I don't know. I mean, we know that running back is weird. I mean, his teammate last year DeMarcado. It was like DeMarcado was nothing, and now he's like he had a role for several weeks in the NFL as a UDFA. So I think Bailey has some skill, and if opportunities are all we need with running backs, but don't expect to hear this name called early or maybe even at all on NFL draft day.
Thanks for that.
That's
my pick, man.
I'll say the same
you said
thing.
He wasn't going to get drafted.
I was going to pick him if you didn't. I'm just saying. But that's just the nature of this running back group. I'm sorry to say, but okay. The only position that I need to take that you have an opportunity to take in front of me at this point is IDP. So I will finish us off there. And I'm going to go with Chris Braswell, edge rusher from Alabama, the other edge rusher from Alabama. Braswell is a player that caught my eye a couple times this season. But these Alabama edge players, it feels like they're always just good and to varying levels. Like you're going to have a Dallas Turner who's maybe a top 10 draft pick. And then you'll have a guy like Braswell, like, oh, maybe he's like, well, it seems like Braswell is actually getting some pretty decent buzz in the process, like even maybe late round 1 sort of NFL draft buzz. So I checked him out, and he's a fun player because this was a Feldman's freak guy. He's got that freakiness, but he is a power rusher. Like he is strong, where Turner is more speed freakiness, but likes to go to the power moves. Braswell is just a power rusher. And I think he does it at a pretty high level, where in a class like this, where, we end up talking a lot about tier 1 edge in these classes, because that's going to be where you make your money from an IDP perspective. But don't forget about this range where there's going to be misses, but there's also going to be some hits with these tier 2 edge players in a class. So Braswell is one of the ones that I'm keeping a close eye on, and the Senior Bowl is the perfect environment, like we talked about earlier, to show that you are a different breed than the rest of the pass rushers here.
I was waiting for like the wingspan numbers and stuff like that for Braswell, because he just looks like he's all arms and legs.
Yep.
It's pretty good. It's not like as shocking as I expected it to be, because I figured that he'd like have the longest arms, but like an 80-inch wingspan is pretty good, man.
Yep.
Like he's got long arms and he uses them well to set that edge. And you can see him like set and contains when that power rush move doesn't work. He kind of stays patient and doesn't let that quarterback get outside. So, I mean, I can't say that I've done a deep dive on Braswell and like done a ton of tapes study with him, but I know that he's a good player. He's an interesting player, and that, like you said, he's been getting a lot of buzz, and I'll definitely be keeping my eye on him through this Senior Bowl process.
All right. We are now down to just picking what we got to pick yet. But
That's right.
There's some interesting conversations that we've yet to have. So where are we headed next?
So I'm going to save wide receivers for last. So I'm going to go back to the IDP while we're here, and I'm going to take Cedric Gray. Camp Dynasty legend also.
Camp Dynasty legend.
So Cedric Gray out of UNC is an off-ball linebacker, and he's one of the linebacker names that's kind of like floating in this, top 5 off-ball linebacker area. And I'd say it's a pretty decent class for IDP in general. For linebackers, I mean, we have a couple names, which is not always the case. So Cedric Gray had a great season last year. He came in 6'1", 232, so maybe a little short, but, nothing terrible. And he just, he's a very versatile linebacker. He did everything at UNC. I think he was a little better last year than he was this year. It felt like he ran a little more off instinct and maybe like turned it up a little more last year and kind of slowed his game down more this year. And that's probably a better thing, but it's more fun to watch linebackers like fly around and get a bunch of tackles and all that rather than watching you like dissect a play and like take on a block so then your backside guy can fill the gap. It's like, okay, I get that's the right play, but like I want you to make the tackle. So Cedric is a good player. I think he improved as a player, and I'm sure he'll stick on an NFL roster, and he'll be pretty good. Kind of like diet Payton Wilson in this Senior Bowl, where he's not going to be flying around laying the wood like Wilson, but he'll still be able to put on a little bit of a show.
Yeah, I'm curious to find out what happens with Gray. It's just a name that you haven't been hearing much. He came into the year, I mean, like you said, Camp Dynasty legend. You brought this name up like week 3 last year. And
Right.
So this has been around for a while. He came into the year as a top 5 IDP for me. And like you said, just kind of had a worse year. It wasn't a bad year, but just didn't really get better. And weirdly enough, like his tackling grade in terms of PFF went down pretty significantly. And then you take a look at the missed tackles. We're at 19 missed tackles, which is about 15%. So, there's things there where it's like, what happened this year? But coverage grade went up. And I remember, seeing an adequate coverage linebacker from 2022 film. Seemed like a rangy player back, when I was watching him as well. Thought he had a little bit of completeness to his game, nothing at a high level. And I wonder, will this be an opportunity for him to kind of stand out in a group that is a little bit depleted, because we've lost some names in this linebacker room, players like Jalen Ford, who have some buzz. He pulls out here. Now suddenly it's Payton Wilson and then some guys. Well, Cedric Gray is more than a guy, and I think he has an opportunity this week to stand out.
Sure does.
All right. I'm going to keep this conversation interesting. So let's go back to quarterback.
Ooh, okay.
Let's have the Bo Nix conversation.
Oh, boy.
Because that's who I'm picking. Because whether I want to or not, that's sort of where we are at with the remaining quarterbacks here. And some folks would have you believe that Nix belongs alongside of a player like Michael Penix, maybe even ahead of a player like Michael Penix. Because remember earlier when I said Daniel Jeremiah didn't have Michael Penix in his first round in the first mock draft that he dropped? Well, he did have Bo Nix at 14th overall to the Saints. So what is going on with Bo Nix? I don't know. So let's talk about it, because we didn't really talk about Nix when we did quarterback rankings, because neither of us felt a need to. Neither of us saw this as a startable NFL a long-term starting NFL quarterback. That's not what I saw on film. Now, I recognize that he's got a good arm. He's got a good arm. The Oregon scheme was not really favorable to him showing that off all the time because of the nature of the low ADOT, heavy screen, RPO style offense that they're running. Now, when he does go downfield, it gets very shaky. And something else that I noticed, which, there's layers of argument to have about this point, but outside of structure, he gets very, very inaccurate and a little jumpy. Like, he is pure game manager, in my opinion. And some people will have you say, oh, that's fine. Put him put him in, put him on the 49ers. Okay, great. He's better than Brock Purdy. He's got more arm talent, better arm than Brock Purdy. I'm saying what I think you'd hear from folks, because that's how people are talking about Nix. And so I can't get
that's the
behind
MVP
it.
of our league right there that
yeah.
you're talking about, Brock Purdy.
I mean, when he makes amazing plays like that bomb to Ayuk the other day.
Signature.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's another conversation. But, Bo Nix, I am at least keeping an open mind to what happens this week. I think my film grade on him is not horrible, but it certainly is not first round. I mean, it's late day 2 sort of a grade is what I have on him right now. I'm maintaining an open mind that if he shows this week that he belongs in that conversation in terms of, I'm not going to say I'm going to put him in the first round, but I'm saying if he shows that he can hang with Penix in this environment, make good throws consistently, look like a better player than he did for much of the season in terms of like analysis wise. Like, I know he had a fantastic season for Oregon, but within the confines of that scheme is how it happened. So maybe if he shows a little bit outside of that environment, a little bit more off structure sort of stuff, then maybe we can have more conversations about Bo Nix.
I'm good. I don't need to have more conversations about Bo Nix. I've had enough, and it's been like 4. I mean, some guys are just meant to be career backups, and that just seems like what Bo Nix is meant to be, and that's a good thing. I mean, if I could have any job, it's a career backup, man. Like, you get paid, sit on the bench, hold the Microsoft Surface, and let your starter like bitch and moan, and maybe you get to take a knee at the end of a half or something so he doesn't ruin his stats. Count me in. So I just think like his downfield stuff is uninspiring. It seems like the real downfield stuff is him throwing to a wide open Troy Franklin more often than not. And then everything else is in structure. It's like he's throwing crossing routes, he's throwing overs, he's throwing RPOs, he's got bubbles, and he's letting people get some yak. And the accuracy is good when he's on time, on target. It's solid. And when he hits that back foot and rips it, like, it can be a nice throw. But like you said, you got to be able to create. And you got to be able to, throw a 12-yard comeback on a 5-step drop with pressure. And it just doesn't seem like that's something that he's going to be able to do consistently. So I don't, there's people that want Bo Nix, that actually want Bo Nix as their quarterback. And I would caution you to, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I think we're so afraid of JJ McCarthy being the quarterback that flies up the boards and dominates the headlines despite mediocre tape. Well, we might be looking at the real one right now with Bo Nix, but we'll find out. Like I said, I'm keeping an open mind. Change my mind, Bo Nix, please, because if you show it to me, I will respect you slightly more.
Yeah.
All right. Let's keep it moving. We're whittling down this list. We're starting to get to the sort of it's disrespectful to call them breadcrumbs, but it's kind of where we're at. So you're up next. Do you have a wide receiver to pick yet?
I do.
Oh,
I have 2 wide receivers to pick.
You have 2 then disregard my breadcrumbs. I'm thinking about what I have.
That's why I did it this way, is so we could save some of the fun conversation for the end here. I'm going Johnny Wilson as my second wide receiver. He's one of the guys that actually measured in how we expected him to. 6'6", 237. I mean, big guy, go fast. That's what we got here with Johnny Wilson. He's a physical player. I wouldn't say he plays 6'6", but like, it shows up. Like, it's not always, and there's a lot of fluidity that he has, which is a good thing. Like, he doesn't always play his size, and I'm not saying that as a negative. He's catching the ball in traffic. He's running after the catch. He looks fluid. He doesn't look like awkward. You see some of these tall, skinny tight ends, and it's like they don't feel right in their body. Johnny Wilson feels like a wide receiver. that's just tall. And so I mean, this is another guy that shared a lot of the sugar in this Florida State offense. And, we talked about it with Trey Benson, just like didn't get enough of, got a really small slice of the pie. And Johnny Wilson kind of the same way. Like he just like you would like to see him featured in an offense, and it just didn't seem like that's what Florida State was doing with anybody. So there's going to be a clip, I can guarantee it, of him just making somebody look so small because of how big he is, how athletic he is. He's going to moss somebody, and it's going to go like semi-viral. It's going to be like, oh my God, what is this? And it's Johnny Wilson.
Yeah, when we talked about wide receivers in the summer and we talked a little bit about Johnny Wilson, it was like, this is like just so different, and different is scary because you don't really have a benchmark to say, okay, yeah, this works, or he could be this in the NFL. And after this year and watching some film leading up into the Senior Bowl here, I do think I think he's a good player. I still don't know what his role is in the NFL. And now there are a lot more people when the measurables come out, and it's like people that weren't familiar or maybe refamiliarizing with this 6'7", 230 something wide receiver say, should he be a tight end? And I don't necessarily disagree with that take. I don't think he looks like a tight end right now, though, on film. So it's hard. He is like a tweener on the other side. Normally tweeners, like you're kind of smaller in between two spots. He's like between, he might need to go up a level.
Yeah, he's just too big to be a receiver.
Yeah, and I think one area where his size and specifically his length really shows up and he uses it really well is against press coverage. I mean, he is very good against press coverage in getting his hands to work at the line of scrimmage and getting off of the corners that are trying to play physical with him because he's not the most explosive starter. So he's using his length and his physicality to kind of break that press, and he wins a lot of those reps. So that's something that I like from him in terms of how is his size helping him. And one area in which I wish it helped him more was when he's going over the top of guys, because you see the numbers this year, 9 for 22 uncontested catch opportunities. And that's showing up on film where he's not really playing to this size in those situations. And honestly, the hands in general are they're kind of shaky. It kind of came and went this year. It's like when he was having issues, they were all coming in the same games. He has 2 games this year with 2 drops, and he had 5 total on the year, which was just about 11%. So it wasn't horrible, but it was something that was like, man, there's just these were like wide open, like concentration, wide open drops. So there's just things on his film that I don't love. And then there's this weird, like, what are you that, I think this is a great place for him to, again, it's like we say with all these players, but this is what this is all about. Like, show why your weaknesses or your perceived challenges aren't a big deal. Like, show up here, make it known that you can play this position and that you can win routes against corners in a variety of ways and catch the ball. And then we can have more conversations about Johnny Wilson.
He also has a 7-foot wingspan.
Just...
So that is another measurable that came out, and it looks like that. But like you said, use it.
Yeah.
Get up, because every once in a while he does, and it's like, this is unbeatable. This is unstoppable. Yeah. Just do this every time. Like spam goal line fade with Johnny Wilson. And it doesn't work that way because, it's questionable, and the hands are questionable. And so is he going to be able to convert to tight end? I don't know. That's hard, man. That's really, like, you got to learn how to block.
He looks good blocking corners.
Yeah, exactly. Now go get in the trenches and do that same thing. He's got mitts. 9.5-inch hands, not the biggest wide receiver hands. I just found out that
for a player with 7-foot wingspan to have under 10-inch hands is kind of weird.
I know. I was just looking. This guy from Southeast Missouri. He's 6'1". And he's got 10-inch hands. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Might have to look him up after this. But yeah, Johnny Wilson, interesting player, very interesting. It'll be, we'll see how this process goes for him and what the NFL thinks of him, because there's some money on the table for him, and if he wants to be like a dominant 6'6" wide receiver, he can be. But if things don't go right, he ends up being some tweener and he goes like the J.J. Arcega-Whiteside route and ends up just kind of fizzling.
Yeah, that's a bad name around the draft time. All right, I am up, and I believe I have 2 positions yet to go. I have running back and tight end, so I will finish off the running backs, and I will take Ray Davis from Kentucky. This is a player that had a really good season as well. Could have earned himself a badge week 5 against Florida, in which he went for 280 yards. One thing that I noticed, though, in watching film this year, Florida got lit up against running backs and Jaden Daniels running the ball. Like, this was a bad run defense, at least from what I was seeing. So, he exploited them, 280 yards. Good job, young man, but did well for himself around that game too. Nothing crazy, but it ends up 1,131 yards and 14 touchdowns for Ray Davis. This is another older running back who is smaller than he was listed. So it's like a running theme with these Senior Bowl running backs, where it's like they're all older, they're all smaller than you thought they were. He came in at 5'8", 220 instead of the 5'10", 216 that he was listed at. So a little bit heavier, but loses those 2 inches. He's not a player that really was electrifying or super exciting on film. And in fact, it's another player that I have a day 3 grade on, but I think this one in particular was the better of the group in terms of like the Cody Schrader, Emani Bailey tier of running backs. I thought Ray Davis had the best film out of that group. So he is a player that does interest me this week. And it's like, I don't expect him to like turn the tides here and be like a starting NFL running back by any means, but I do think that with a strong week and a good week, he can be one of the, better day 3 running backs in this class.
He's the muscle hamster of the group. I mean, this guy, I'm not surprised at all about what he measured in at, because, I mean, he is compact.
Yeah.
And he is all muscle. It's like, and he uses it. Like, he runs angry. He'll run through you. He'll go down with you. He's a fun player to watch. It's kind of the same conversation that we're having. It's nothing like special. It's nothing that's going to, jump off the screen. He's a guy that can make it happen at Kentucky. And maybe he can make it happen at the Senior Bowl. And, work himself into the draft and work himself, rise up a little bit. I don't know. So definitely a day 3 guy, and we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah. The takeaway here, I mean, we're done with running backs now, and obviously, we know, like, okay, these guys don't sound too excited about these running backs. Well, there's a reason for that, but it does pay to familiarize yourself with these players, because again, we know opportunity is everything at the running back position. So if there's a situation here where Ray Davis ends up as number 2 or something on a depth chart based on, whatever happens coming out of camp, it's good to know kind of that this player might have enough to get by in a role. So, and I think he does. I think he's a player that belongs on an NFL roster. All right. One pick for you to make, and you got a fun position yet to pick from.
Yes, I still have a wide receiver to pick. I went, full TikTok brain, and I watched Ryan Flournoy's southeastern Missouri State highlights. Not inspired to pick him. So he does have mitts. They're big hands. He's got the 10-inch hands. But I'm gonna go with Tez Walker because I feel like there's a conversation to be had with Tez Walker at the very least. He is a UNC wide receiver that, there was some questions about his transfer eligibility. All that went down in the middle of this season. Seems like forever ago. And it seems like Drake May was better with him on the field. Now you dive into the tape and it's not super inspiring. It's, he's like a 3-route player. He's athletic. It's not anything super, super jaw-dropping. That being said, there are things to like with Tez Walker. And I think the athleticism is one. He's pretty good after the catch. He's got good hands. He's got, good through contact. He's pretty good through contact. And the 3 routes that he runs, they work. I tell you what. So what I want to see is him at the Senior Bowl in all of these different situations that they're going to put him in these drills, in a scrimmage where they ask him to do more than what he did at UNC. All of this is what I want to see from Tez Walker, and it's going to be put on display this weekend.
Yeah, this was a weird one for me because this is a name that has started to appear in some cases in the end of first rounds in terms of mock drafts from like real mock draft folks. And so catches your eye because in a class like this, it's like, well, holy crap, we're going to put Tez Walker here. Like what's going on? And then you watch him and it's exactly what you just said. Now, the one thing I will say about Tez Walker is that I think this is that player that is a higher NFL pick than he is a fantasy pick because his number one asset is his speed. I mean, he is a burner. And the 3 routes that you're referring to, his best one is that 9 ball when he is flying downfield and they would go. And it was like, it almost felt like over the course of the year, it was like, I think it was the Duke game, which is week 11, where it was like, just keep running that route.
Yeah.
Drake May is just going to keep throwing it and you're just going to keep catching it and scoring, or maybe it was Miami. He had 3 touchdowns or something. It was one of the games where he had multiple touchdowns and it was just all deep shots. So I think we know that the NFL covets speed. It's rare. Teams need it. And it's not always like production based. It's not always going to be like, this is the number 1 fantasy wide receiver, but he's going to serve a role on an NFL team. And I think that's where this first round noise comes in. I don't see that at all. I have a 3rd round grade on Tez Walker, but that is sort of my fantasy brain of saying like, how much can I rely on you to be a complete wide receiver that's going to be getting, targeted and getting, consistent amounts of yards every single week. I don't know if Tez Walker is that player right now, but like you said, we're going to find out this week, is there more to this player? Is this a product of the UNC scheme? I mean, like I said, it was like, just keep running deep and Drake May is just going to keep hitting it. Maybe there's more to this player than just that. I didn't find his routes, that great when he was running other routes, but you never know. Maybe in this environment, something will awaken in Tez Walker, but
something else with Tez Walker is like, you got to take into account he came into this team halfway through the season.
Yeah.
And it's hard to learn a full playbook when you get dropped in week 6 to a team with some expectations, with a number 1 potential draft pick heading the offense. Like, you're having a lot asked of you. And so maybe they only tell him like, hey man, we're only going to have you run, 8s and 9s for the most part. Like, we'll let you know. And him and Drake May got to work out timing through the season. And like, there's all of these little things that go into why is this the only thing that he's the only way he's being used? Why is this like only downfield stuff? And I mean, I feel like that he's better than what he looked like on tape this year. And that's mostly just a feeling, because like the Kent State stuff is similar, but it's also Kent State. And it's like, there's questions. There's a lot of questions that could be cleared up on Saturday.
Yep, definitely. All right, I'll bring it home. And I'm not talking about a player that's going to be a first-round draft pick, maybe. But I will talk about another tight end. Because I have to pick one.
What a segue.
I have two names, actually. One of them is the easy and obvious choice from this group, so I think I'll just do that, and it's Jaheim Bell, because Jaheim Bell is just a player that has been around now for 2 years here, another Camp Dynasty legend, if you will, and a player that I just, the conversation around Jaheim Bell is always just, what is he? What is he? Because now he comes in, measures. I mean, we're already talking about him being a tweener, and he's 6'3", 240. That's what he's listed at. Then the measurements come in today, and it kind of lines up more with what it feels like Jaheim Bell is, which is 6'1", 244. So weight side of things, he's carrying, even more weight than he's listed at, and that's cool. But the 6'1" thing really stands out because he looks so small on film, and then you find out, man, he's really small.
He's almost 6'2".
Yeah. So, I mean, he's a playmaker. I mean, that's how he was always used. I mean, it wasn't quite what we expected these last 2 years in terms of, 2 years ago at South Carolina, it felt like the world was his. The offense, could run through him as a runner, as a pass catcher. Didn't happen. Transfers to Florida State, high-powered offense, all of that. And he had a fine year for Florida State, but nothing flashy, nothing like excellent, anything like that. So I'm just curious to find out what he looks like this week, because I don't know what to expect in terms of his NFL role. I know the player has skill, but what does a team see him as? I know, we threw out like a Chigo Okonkwo sort of a vibe with him, and, he's smaller than Okonkwo even, and Okonkwo was knocked for his size. But if you can use a player like this kind of in that fashion where it's more screen based, it's more of that sort of just get the ball in his hands and then work him down the field. That's what they do with Okonkwo. It's like these big shot plays and then some screen stuff. And he's not going to do a lot in between there, but we see Okonkwo has a role. Can Jaheim Bell have a similar, role and skill set in the NFL? Maybe he can. So let's see what he can do this week.
I have bad news. I'm out on Jaheim.
I mean,
we've come a long way, me and Jaheim, and I just don't see it. I don't see how it's going to work at an NFL level in an NFL scheme, consistently enough to be a fantasy asset. Like that's just not going to happen, unfortunately.
I'm trying to gas him up, but
I know. I'm just like, I was a big Jaheim Bell supporter. Like I've been hyping him up. I had him pretty high last year. I had him in talks in the tight end episodes, both of them this year. And it's just like, I mean, now you're 6'1". like we got to add this on. I'm trying to come up with all these excuses why you don't produce. And now you're also like a small guy. So like, it's tough. He's really good.
You think he's going to play fullback in the NFL? Can he play fullback in the NFL, do you think?
He can. How many teams are really trotting out a fullback? Like 3? So that's where it's like, if a team wants to invest in a fullback, maybe, but I don't know. If you're going to draft a fullback, draft Ben Sinnott, Like, why would we draft Jaheim Bell?
Hey, that's a tight end you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, he has a ton of talent. He's really good at the ball in his hands. But it's hard to see a world where he's fantasy relevant.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He's a fun player with a interesting skill set, which is just always, fascinating to see. Could an NFL team use a player like this? But in terms of a fantasy ceiling and projection, it's really not a player to be super, concerned with. Just for the sake of argument, I will throw out just another tight end name to keep an eye on this week, which is more of a real tight end player. Just Theo Johnson from Penn State, who's a player that
sounds like a tight end.
Yeah, we got the tight end name, we got the 6'6", 260 something build. I mean, he's a player that I watched before the year, summer scouting wise, and it's nothing special or anything, but he's a 260 plus pound man that can move down the field. And
he's
so
257.
Everybody's smaller. What is up with this?
I don't know.
But yeah. So Theo Johnson, if you want to look out for another real tight end, maybe look out for Theo Johnson.
Honorable mentions for me. I have Joe Milton. Can't quit Joe Milton.
Your guy.
Michael Pratt, who's a quarterback out of Tulane, I think, if I'm not making that up.
No, that's right.
Ricky Pearsall, who had the best catch I've ever seen this year. Brendan Rice, Jerry Rice's son. Michael Hall is an edge rusher out of Ohio State that I kind of like.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, the big one for me, Brendan Rice is an interesting player that I would like to dive in more film on. I think he had a good year, and I don't know that I respected it. So I'd like to see what he shows me on film and then see what he can do this
USC's
week.
scheme was really bad.
Is Lincoln Riley washed?
I think that he had a little bit too much Cliff Kingsbury in his ear.
Could see it.
It's the only thing that changed between 2 years ago and this year, other than
That's true.
Good players coming in.
But let's get Cliff back
Jordan
to the
Addison.
NFL, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, outside of Brendan Rice, pass. No,
Roman Wilson is interesting.
Just keep saying wide receivers.
He's a versatile wide receiver. Yeah, I think that's the last name that was on my list that I was like, this guy, I'm gonna tap in and see what's up. So
yeah, that's 20-ish names to keep an eye on at the Senior Bowl. That's a lot. So
you don't have to keep an eye on the running backs if it makes your life easier.
Right.
16.
Yeah, there you go. So keep your eyes on the wide receivers and the quarterbacks and the IDPs. That's what I would say. I think it's going to be a fun quarterback show with Michael Penix and maybe Bo Nix trying to get into this conversation that some folks already have him in. We'll find out. So that's interesting. We know the wide receivers extremely deep. That will be the star of the week. Plenty of clips will hit the timeline, I'm sure, of a lot of these guys doing some crazy things. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then, like we said, IDPs, specifically guys like Latu, like Payton Wilson, like Chris Braswell, like these players where these are legitimate, high-end defensive talents, and they should show that this week in this environment. So it's going to be a lot of fun if you're in it just for, NFL draft as well. There's some fun offensive linemen there too to keep an eye on. It should be a really fun week. It's a really, really deep roster. So really excited to see how it unfolds. And we will be back next week to break that all down, talk about what happened, who the risers were, what we saw, what we heard, and put it all together, Collin, as we move further and further into draft season.
Yep, plenty of pats on the back coming next week.
Yeah, we gave ourselves enough opportunities. If we shoot like 35%, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's like 4 guys.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Boom. I'm in. If you enjoyed our expansive watch list for the Senior Bowl 2024, be sure to find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at camp_dynasty and TikTok at camp.dynasty, and check out our YouTube channel, Camp Dynasty, where video feeds of the pods go up every week. You can get in touch with us on any of those platforms. Let us know who you're looking out for at the Senior Bowl. Let us know who you think we undersold, oversold on this list. We are always open to criticism and feedback because that's what the draft's all about, isn't it, baby?
That's right. I thrive off of hate. We're not getting enough of it. Everybody's so supportive.
I know.
Everybody's like, "Hey, you guys are doing a great job." I like how you explain that. It's like I need something to motivate me.
Yeah, please. Well, if you did enjoy what you heard, also be sure to go and like, rate, review, subscribe, follow the pod feed. We very much appreciate that. So from this point, Collin, it is on to the Senior Bowl. Practices start tomorrow. Let's get locked and loaded, get on the timelines, just sit there refreshing all day.
That's what I'll be doing. Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, man. All right. Thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.